Think about how quickly we are to judge our situation, how quickly we are to get down on ourselves because of where we're at and where we wanted to be by this amount of time. And so we just label it as a failure. And if you're thinking about where you're at right now, and maybe you thought you would be here and you're not even halfway to that goal, I would challenge you to think that you are in the middle of your story and not get caught up thinking that this is the end of your story. I think it's really easy to get wrapped up into what we believe is the outcome of our story in any one given situation. And I'll tell you what I mean. I went to school at a very small Christian school, Liberty Christian High School. I graduated with 40 kids in my class, just to give you the idea of the size of this school. And this was back in Anderson, Indiana, 2007. And when our high school, when I first became a freshman, our school had just moved from a small private Christian school grouping of basketball teams, and we entered in the IHSAA, which is basically just all the schools, regardless of the size. And we were entered into the tournament, the county tournament that was played at the Wigwam. Now, when I was in high school, 17 of the top 20 largest high school basketball gyms were in Indiana. So Indiana high school basketball is a big deal. It still is to this day. And the Wigwam, by the size of the actual stadium, was the largest of all of them. In case you were wondering, Newcastle has the largest seating. But the Wigwam, the Anderson Stadium, was the largest high school gym by size. When I got into sophomore year, we got put into this tournament, and we drew the Indians, which was the Anderson Indians, 4A school. We literally have no business playing them. And my high school coach was new at the time, and he was doing his best, and he drew inspiration from the Bible story, Joshua and the Battle of Jericho. And if you're not familiar with the story, God basically says, Joshua, I want you to display faith and not wage war with weapons. I want you to walk around the city one time for 7 days, and on the seventh day, walk around 7 times and scream and shout and blow your horns, and I'll deliver the city to you. Okay? And if you know the story, essentially they start walking around, and the warriors on the wall of Jericho, they're making fun of them, and they're basically saying, there is no God, like, what are you doing this for? And on the 7th day, they walk around 7 times, scream, and God delivers. The walls of Jericho come down, and they win the city. So my high school basketball coach draws inspiration from this, and he decides that the 7 days leading up to us playing against the Anderson Indians, he's going to walk around the Wigwam. And if you know where the Wigwam is in downtown Anderson, it's not a safe place. So he actually was displaying faith in that moment to walk around in the middle of the night in the dark areas of Anderson. And so he does this for 7 straight days. On the night before the game, he walks around 7 times. I'm not sure if he screamed or not, but that'd be pretty funny if he did. Well, I'd love to tell you that the next day, we beat the Indians, but we did not. We got shellacked. I mean, it was brutal. I believe I still have the newspaper clippings. I was in the paper for being the 3rd leading scorer with 6 points for the Liberty Christian Lions. And so that's normally a story where people hear that and they laugh about it and they think, well, that was dumb and it didn't work. And if that's where the story ended, you could probably make that assumption. But here's the deal. That was my sophomore year. By my senior year, we were sectional runners-up against schools much bigger than us. And the program started to turn around. So much so that 10 years later, we were gone, the players were gone, but coach was still there, and he found himself in the Pacers Arena playing for the Indiana High School State Championships, and they won. They won in 2016, 10 years later. And I have to believe that along the way, he displayed more acts of faith showing that he believed that the team was going to turn around and bigger things were coming. And I think about that sometimes. I think about how quickly we are to judge our situation, how quickly we are to get down on ourselves because of where we're at and where we wanted to be by this amount of time. And so we just label it as a failure. I had these ideas, I displayed faith, and you know what? This was a failure. It didn't work. And you could honestly say that about the walls of the Wigwam. The walls of the Wigwam did not come down that night. Unfortunately, the walls of the Wigwam were shut down. Later, the city of Anderson can't keep the lights on. It's so expensive, so no one's played there. So that my team was one of the last teams to ever play in the Wigwam. I hope someday it gets revamped. It was such a cool place to play. But I want you to think about that when you're thinking about your business, especially because this is a business podcast. When we talk about successful people and what they do to become successful, success is a choice on a regular basis. It's the journey. It's how you keep playing the game that makes you successful. Not, I was good at something, I did it, and now I can talk about how I did it. I mean, we're not retired. Some of us are retiring soon, but most of us are going to play the game for a lot longer. And so if you were to judge the story in that moment, you would say, yes, I found failure in that moment. But most of you are just in the middle of your story and you don't realize it. That story of him walking around the Wigwam was the middle of his story. It was not the end. He had many successful seasons and retired with a winning record and one state championship and many other accolades. But if he would have gotten down on himself and quit right in the middle, that would have been the end of the story. And so if you're thinking about that, if you're thinking about where you're at right now, and maybe you thought you would be here and you're not even halfway to that goal, I would challenge you to think that you are in the middle of your story and not get caught up thinking that this is the end of your story. Display acts of faith along the way. And I guarantee you that those faithful, that the attitude in those moments might be the thing that catapults you to success that you never imagined.